Japanese is a language that fascinates people, and if your life is feeling a bit dull, well, learning Japanese is a great way to shake it up.
日本の皆さん、こんにちは。私は最近日本語を勉強しています。私の日本語は今まだまだですが、もっと上手になりたいです。
But is Japanese hard to learn? Let's find out. If you're learning Japanese, you'll get to do some easy stuff and you'll get to do some really, really hard stuff. So you might need a little bit of inspiration along the way. So there is this legend that Japanese foxes can grow 9 tails. The more tails they have, the wiser and more powerful they become. And maybe learning Japanese is a little bit like that. You just keep earning those foxtails one at a time. And the big payoff? Well, when you grow tail number 9, you'll have infinite wisdom. And you'll get to finally answer one very important question.
What's a foxy?
Wouldn't you love to be able to do that? Japanese writing is special. In one single sentence, you will use 3 different beautiful writing systems. This is no joke. They are called hiragana, katakana, and kanji, and they are all very, very important. The very, very hard one is kanji, so let's save that for later. The first thing you have to learn is all of the hiragana and katakana because they are basically the original alphabets of Japanese. The main one is hiragana. It has 46 letters that represent all of the native Japanese sounds. Now the nice thing is that each vowel only has 1 sound, nothing like the complexities of English. You will mainly use hiragana for the grammar parts of a sentence. Now, katakana, well, in a way, that's just a different way of writing the first script, the hiragana that we just looked at. You can kind of think of it as the difference between upper and lowercase letters in English. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's broadly right. So katakana also has 46 letters with the exact same sound, but you don't use them in the same way. You mostly only use katakana for foreign words, sound effects, words that have rare kanji, and if you want to emphasize something. So imagine that you wanted to text your friend about a cool show you watched on TV last night. You will write the message mostly in hiragana and maybe a few kanji in there, but the Japanese word for TV is borrowed from English. So you'll write that one word in katakana. See how that works? But they look similar. So how on earth do you know which is which? I will tell you in just a moment, but see if you can guess first. Okay, so how can you tell hiragana and katakana apart? Well, you look at their shape. Hiragana is rounder and curlier, and katakana is pointier. Sounds simple? That's the best way to describe it. They both originally came from the same Chinese characters. Hiragana are basically the cursive form of the entire Chinese character, while katakana are little chunks taken from one part of the character. For example, the U sound in Japanese for both letters originally came from this one single Chinese character. But I shouldn't be giving you clues about the third writing system just yet, because this isn't the crazy part just yet. Japanese sounds are interesting and really quite simple. For one, there are only 5 basic vowel sounds, and the consonants are pretty basic too. In fact, all Japanese syllables, with the exception of the N letter, end in a vowel, which makes the words blend together really nicely.
Ice cream.
See those vowel sounds in between? Even with borrowed words, Japanese puts vowels between all of the sounds. There are also no mixed sounds or complex consonant clusters like these English ones to worry about.
Flap R. So let's practice. La. La.
So do you think you could handle the famous Japanese R? Obviously, Japanese has some new sounds to learn in the modern world, like these others that we don't have in English, for example. It works both ways. And if you're wondering if Japanese is a tonal language like Mandarin Chinese, well, you can relax. It's not.
Me.
In Japanese, the pitch of your voice does matter though, and it's a real telltale sign of a foreigner if you get the pitches a little bit off. And while we're on the topic of sounds,
ペコペコ、カツカツ、キラキラ。
remember when you were a kid and your parents taught you all of the animal sounds? You know how the animals say the words in English? Well, apart from that one sound.
What's up, foxy?
In Japanese culture, people use something called onomatopoeia in everyday life to describe all sorts of things. Animal sounds, textures, feelings, emotions. You might remember this from school. Onomatopoeia is where the pronunciation of a word sounds like its actual meaning, like boom, for example. Anyway, it's a very important part of sounding Japanese. So, drum roll, what does the fox say? Kong kong? Well, now you know. Another awesome one is waku waku, and you say it when you are wriggling with excited anticipation, like when you are excited to click these 3 buttons right here to like and subscribe to the channel. You can say waku waku. Remember that. You can cross out a few grammar points right off the bat because these are all things that Japanese doesn't even have. You will never have to guess the gender of a tree or a swimming pool. There are no words like the and a, the articles, to get right. And there are only two basic tenses, past and non-past. Japanese grammar is actually incredibly logical, and the trickiest thing you will deal with is verb endings and a few particles. So let's check out those somewhere in the middle things. You do have to conjugate Japanese verbs. Sorry guys, but I will start with the best news. Japanese only has 2 irregular verbs and all the others follow set patterns for the endings. It depends on which group they are in. In the beginning, it will seem like verbs only end in mas for positive situations or masen for negative situations, which is quite easy. Mas means something will happen in the future or happens regularly. Masen means it won't or it doesn't happen. Then you discover that there are a couple more verb endings. Mashita means it's done, it has happened. Masen deshita means it didn't happen at all. This is the kind of pattern you will find for all verbs, so that's not so bad, right? Well, it does get more complicated as you go along, especially since you even use different verb endings depending on who you are speaking to. Yeah, I'll have to tell you something about that story later, but don't you dare be scared off just yet. This is just still the easy part. Japanese is your basic topic comment language. You first mentioned the topic and then you put your comment on it. Really quite easy, but there is more. In English, a sentence goes subject, verb, object. So the fox caught a mouse. But usually a Japanese sentence goes subject, object, verb. Japanese puts its verbs at the end of a sentence, and that is weird if you're not used to it. But the nice thing is that it's very consistent. Japanese will always put the verb at the end of the sentence, and believe it or not, your brain is actually very good at understanding rearranged words. Eventually, they will become natural in time. As for adjectives, they work pretty much like in English. Japanese adjectives come before the noun, so a black motorbike, a red fox, but the word order isn't what's important, and here's why. Japanese sentences have a thing called particles that tell us who did what in the sentence. Now, a particle is a small word like wa, and it comes right after the word it marks. And without it, you won't really know what is going on. After all, Japanese sentences don't use spaces. Imagine trying to read a book with no spaces between the words. But particles save the day. Have a look at this. See what happens when I put wa after the fox? Well, that wa means that the fox is the topic of the sentence. It's the thing that I'm talking about, the one who did the catching. And as for the o, it tells you that the mouse is the object of the sentence, the one who gets caught. Now look what happens if I add in another kind of particle to the very end. This is a question particle, ka. Ka turns my sentence into a question. Just like that. Now there are lots of particles and each one has its own meaning. So because of particles, even if you change the word order, you still know who did what. Don't worry yet that there are actually 188 Japanese particles. You just need to see Japanese grammar with your own 2 eyes in a logical order, preferably every day, and it will make sense in no time. The single best way to get used to it is by seeing it all in context. There's of course some memorization involved for sure, but also just like with the kana that we were talking about earlier, the best way to get used to strange word order and particles is just spending lots and lots of time with content. That means reading books of simple stories, anything that shows you those verbs and how they look in their natural state, not in a boring old grammar book. You really have to see the characters repeated over and over and over in context and in sentences that you understand, which will be really important when we get to the kanji. That's right, I have not forgotten about the kanji. I don't want you to go and hide off in the woods just yet.
Good morning.
What do you mean?
In Japan, it's extremely important to show respect and humility, and they have this politeness thing called Keigo. If you want to speak to people who outrank you, your boss, your teacher, a policeman, a grandparent, or Gandalf, then it's really important to use what's called honorific speech. Honorifics are special words that you use to sound more polite. There are 2 things you have to do. First, you should humble yourself. That means downplay your own thoughts, your own opinions, your own actions. And then you uplift the other person. You praise their opinions and their actions. But how do you do this? Well, you have to learn the right politeness words, and then you use the right form when you conjugate the verbs. Have a look. There are also honorific prefixes that you can attach to nouns. So for example, your honorable sir, thank you for having me, or even your honorable house is beautiful. Not so bad, right? You just have to learn them off by heart. No chance at all that you will accidentally praise yourself and humble your host. What could possibly go wrong? If there is one thing that moves Japanese up the ladder from medium to really quite difficult, it is, of course, kanji. Now, kanji are characters that come originally from China, and there are thousands of them. Nobody even knows exactly how many there are, but don't panic because you don't have to learn them all. Japanese kids at school learn 2,136 of them. So if you start with those, you'll be just fine. And here's the beauty of it. Kanji gives incredibly precise meaning to things. Imagine if instead of writing the words circle or triangle, you could just draw them. Well, kanji is a bit like that, and you will see them in most Japanese sentences. We use kanji for most nouns and the root part of adverbs, verbs, and adjectives. The grammatical part of those words are written in hiragana, which we looked at earlier. Now, the only problem is there is a lot more going on than just a circle or just a triangle. In fact, most kanji are made up of two parts. There is a meaning part and a pronunciation part. So you can often guess the meaning and pronunciation of new characters, even if you've never seen them before, which is quite handy. Japanese is a complex language, so it is definitely not among the easiest that you can learn. The Foreign Service Institute ranks Japanese as one of the hardest languages of all, but once you know what's really going on with the language, well, you're going to have a lot of fun, I can guarantee you that. And if you're looking for an easy way to get started with Japanese, then a very good place to start would be with our Japanese language program here at StoryLearning. We have courses for complete beginners all the way up to advanced level, and of course you'll be learning through the power of story, so it is a lot of fun. Links to check out this are in the description below, along with this video, which tells the incredible story of the Japanese language, which is a story that not many people know about at all, and you really should.